On June 19th and 20th in 1848, the first United States Women's Rights Convention was held in New York. This convention would later be known as the Seneca Falls Convention and was organized by two women named Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Stanton. At the event, supporters of women's rights signed the Declaration of Sentiments, which demanded equal social status and legal rights, like voting, for women. During this time, the main issue for women was not having the right to vote, so the goal of the convention was to gain women's suffrage. Unfortunately, the convention did not have any short-term effects. It was only until 1919, nearly 70 years later, that the 19th Amendment was passed that allowed women to vote. Although the Seneca Falls Convention did not have an immediate effect, it set the stage for later generations by encouraging women not to be afraid to march and protest for their rights.
Which is minimum wage, overtime pay eligibility, record keeping, and child labor standards affecting full-time and part-time workers in the private sector and in federal, state, and local governments. Quote, today, women earn 79 cents for every dollar earned by men, even though they make up almost 50% of the workforce. When President Kennedy enacted the Equal Pay Act in 1963, women were actually earning less, or 59 cents for every dollar earned by men. The Equal Pay Act was enacted for this very reason, so that men and women are given equal pay for equal work. In 1942, because of the large number of women taking jobs during World War II, the War Labor Board urged that employers make adjustments to salary rates so that women were paid equally to men. Although pay equality was addressed, it was never enacted by employers at this time. Most recently, in 2009, President Obama signed into the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act to further equal pay for women. And in 2010, the National Equal Enforcement Task was created, bringing together various government agencies to further combat violations of equal pay laws. According to data released by the Pew Research Center, more than 4 in 10 working women say they've been discriminated against at work because of their gender. Also, based on a survey of 5,000 adults, women are twice as likely as men are to say they've experienced discrimination based on gender. 1 in 4 women say they've earned less than a man doing the same job. Data from PayScale, a workplace compensation firm, shows that even when you compare a man and a woman with the same job title at the same company and with similar education and experience, the man still earns 2.4% more than the woman on average. Even though several laws have been passed throughout history to combat job discrimination and the gender wage gap, it is still one of the many challenges faced by women today.
Roe v. Wade was a landmark case causing significant advancement in women's rights. This case solidified the legality of abortions in the United States. This was taken to court when Jane Roe wanted to have a legal and safe abortion in the state of Texas. Texas was notorious for having some of the strictest abortion laws in the country. They were illegal unless it was endangering the mother's life. Even today, it's very hard to have a legal abortion in Texas. Before abortions were legal, quote, in 1965, legal abortions made up 1/6 of all pregnancy and childbirth-related deaths. A survey conducted between 1965 and 1967 found that 8 in 10 low-income women in New York City who had an abortion attempted a dangerous self-induced procedure. Back alley abortions were very common and deadly procedures, and when abortions were made illegal in the 1880s, the rate of abortions only increased. Leading up to this case, states had been repealing abortion rights for 6 years. Many women died from going to untrained practitioners or trying an abortion on themselves. When the Supreme Court upheld the legality of Roe v. Wade in 1973, they said Americans' right to privacy included that right of a woman to decide whether or not to have a child. It was a major win for women everywhere. They rejoiced and celebrated their victory. Death from abortion dropped immediately and were almost down to 0. Even though the Supreme Court passed this law, many states were upset and tried to start passing new laws that place restrictions on abortions and stop federal and state funding. Today, more and more states are passing laws to restrict abortions. Soon, legal abortions may be a thing of the past. More and more pro-life supporters are staging protests, and we could see a change in abortion rights for women, potentially a step backwards. But women are being stripped of more than just abortion rights. Brock Turner, former Stanford student on scholarship for swimming. One night, 2 Swedish cyclists saw him raping an unconscious woman. When she woke up in the hospital, she had No one told her what had happened. She had no idea why she was there. She found out what happened to her when the rest of the world did, in the news. He had raped her when she was unconscious behind a dumpster. He would never admit to the crime because it would ruin his reputation. When he went to court, he would hear the emotional letter the defendant had written for him, and he still could not own up to what he had done. He called it a mistake that they both drank too much that night, and since she could not remember it, none of it actually happened. He was sentenced 6 months. 6 months for raping a woman while she was unconscious. If he had not been seen by the cyclist, he probably would have walked and went on living life like nothing ever happened. The reality is most women are afraid to say they are victims of sexual assault because they think society will see them as weak. People will treat them differently, and people won't even believe them. That is why so little women came forward to say they are victims. 310 out of 1,000 women will go to the police. 57 perpetrators will be arrested for the crime, but only 6 will see the inside of a jail cell. Brock Turner is one example of how sexual assault is not seen as a serious crime, especially for a white boy who's on scholarship to Stanford. His dad even defended him, saying 6 months was too much for 20 minutes of action. Turner would serve 6 months of sentencing and now walk the same streets you and I do. Today, more women are coming forward with the Me Too movement, but sexual assault is still a major battle for women.
A huge social discrimination that women face on a day-to-day basis is sexual assault. It could be somebody that you really could trust that could hurt you. In a recent case with Larry Nassar, the Olympic doctor for the gymnastics team, they all trusted him as somebody they could go to when they had some sort of injury, and he took advantage of that. Many girls, like in this situation, are facing the issue of sexual assault, but are too afraid to say anything. According to ABC News, he was charged with assaulting 156 young women, some of them including Kyle Steffens, Carrie Hogan, Gwen Anderson, Simone Biles, Gabby Douglas, Jessica Howard, were some of the many who had endured years upon years of sexual assault. Nassar was looked at for years as a very caring young man who was always concerned about the girls on the team, but soon people found out the true side of him. For years instilling fear in these young girls who don't know what to do, Nassar attempted to apologize for his mistakes. Quote, "For all those involved, I am so horribly sorry that this was like a match that turned into a forest fire out of control. I just want healing. We need to move forward in a sense of growth and healing, and I pray for that." The judge on the case, Judge Rosemary Aquilin, you need to use that position of trust that you had in the most vile way to abuse children. Women getting assaulted has been an issue for years. According to the Violence Against Women Act website, 85% of domestic violence victims are women. Many of them are too afraid to speak up about their problems so that they can get help. In 1998, it was recorded that 17.7 million American women have been victims of attempted or completed rape. Women from the age of 18 to 24 who are in college are 3 times more likely to endure sexual assault. 90% of women after getting attacked experience mental issues, like PTSD. It can cause suicidal thoughts. It has broken up families. Most young people do not report anything. 1 in 5 women are sexually assaulted in college, and only 5% of bystanders have reported it to help the girl. 81% receive sexual assault in a verbal form. Something that helped women with this issue is the Violence Against Women Act that was made a law in 1994. It was to help with the issue of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. There was a lot of issues from the community with this event because people believe that violence affects both men and women. People believe that women were using this to get money from the state. It was the first federal legislative package to end violence against women. 256 sponsors in the House and 68 in the Senate. Congress had asserted its power to pass the Violence Against Women Act under the Commerce Clause in the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. There is also education and training about violence against women for victim advocates. The government has created a number that victims of abuse and sexual assault can call at any time if they need any help. It's called the Domestic Abuse Hotline. Both the Larry Nassar case and this act made in 1994 both cover a serious topic of sexual assault. There has been great steps in the right direction to fix this issue and has improved tremendously today versus a long time ago. In the Larry Nassar case, these young women are fighting for their freedom from this horrible thing that has happened to them. The Violence Against Women Act is helping women fight the issue of any type of assault and helping them become strong and fight for their rights.
As mentioned earlier, discrimination in the workplace has always been an infamous issue for women. Data states that at least 25% of women have faced sexual assault at work. Keep in mind that that number does not include those who experience a pay difference or exclusion. Solutions for this problem. First, we need to get more women on executive boards in businesses and companies. A gender equality study from 2014 said that only 18.4% of women were on executive boards in the US. And although this is an obvious issue, it is yet to be solved. But why? Past gender roles are the ones to blame, and they are still affecting our world today. Men have been the dominant gender for thousands of years. It is still the norm for men to be the big bosses of companies, causing it to be hard for women to move their way up. The workplace will have several positive effects, starting with how people view women. With Larry Nassar's case discussed earlier, it is safe to say that women are victimized too much by men, and now it is time that it stops. Employers need to start monitoring the workplace intently and keep an open communication line with employees to make sure that no inappropriate behavior is being bypassed. Another important piece of advice for bosses is to treat sexual assault incidences seriously and effectively. If these situations aren't handled correctly, people will begin to think they can get away with it, ultimately making the situation worse.
People are becoming more open about their struggles so that they can help themselves and other women that are struggling to admit what they're dealing with. There needs to be more improvement towards making women aware that there is an option when they are needing help. If they speak up about what their struggles are, they're helping themselves more than not saying anything and suffering silently. The answer is to educate people and women on what they can do if they get themselves into a situation where they're dealing with violence or sexual assault. The National Sexual Assault Hotline helped an average of 15,964 people every month, and the number keeps going up.